Today it's my pleasure to welcome Bill Leckie to our podcast series, Empowerment, What's the Score? For those of you who don't know Bill, he is a Scottish sports journalist, appeared on TV, and Bill will come on to speak about that, and BBC Radio 5 Live, amongst others. He's been to the Olympics, the Euros, the World Cup, amongst others, and he's written several books. So again, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you on, Bill. As the title suggests, we're dealing with empowerment and what that means to each individual, whatever floats your boat, in effect. So with no further ado, I'll welcome you, Bill, and I think I like to start at the beginning. So let's crack on from there.
Good place to start, David. Good place to start, pal.
We'll start from there and let's see where the wind takes us, Bill.
Yeah. Yep.
So where did it all begin? From humble beginnings, I think, in Paisley, I'm right in saying that, to journalists travelling throughout the world.
Right, well, I was about 8-year-old. I was 8 years old. I was going to see St Mum with my dad. And when you went down to the old Love Street, there was the adults gate, and then there was the boys gate where you paid half price, whatever. Right. And next to that was this door that I'd always seen that said press and complimentaries.
Right, okay.
And one day I'm standing at the boys' gate, my dad's in the adults' gate, and at the press and complimentaries, I see standing next to me my primary school headmaster.
Right, okay.
He goes through that door. So on the other side, I say, "Hello, Mr. McDougall." He says, "Hello, Billy." And he says, and I said, "This is my dad, Mr. How you doing?" And he says, "I need to rush, I'm doing that." So I saw him at school on the Monday, and I said, "Excuse me, but why were you going through that door?" And he says, "Well, I don't go by my own name when I do this, but I write a weekly St Mirren match report for a paper. So a paper that doesn't exist anymore called the Paisley Pictorial." And he said, "So that's my kind of part-time thing." And I said, "Wow, that's great." And the first thing that struck me was he gets in to see St Mirren for nothing. I thought, that's a good job.
So anyway, we're talking.
I was quite good at English and stuff in those days, and English and stuff, as they say. So, and anyway, a week or so later, I got a shout to go to the headmaster's office. I thought, what have I done? And I went, and he says, "I've spoken to the editor. How would you like to do a little piece on St Mirren for the next home game?"
Mm-hmm.
I went, wow. So we played Motherwell. We lost, as we always did in those days.
Mm-hmm.
We got relegated that season, as we do quite a lot. And as you know, and I had this piece down the side. He has match report on the back page, and mine down the side with my name and all that. And I was hooked. And my mum, till the day she died, kept a little cutting in her purse.
Okay.
And that was me. And from that day on, all I ever wanted to do was be a sports writer. And I have no idea what I'd have done if it hadn't worked out. But luckily, it's worked out very well. 40 years in the game now, so...
Yeah, I'm just thinking, Bill, I mean, at that period, it's still the same today in Scotland, particularly in that part of Scotland, the west of Scotland, for those that don't know, it's very difficult to break the mould of Rangers and Celtic for historical reasons, for religious reasons, all that nonsense. So you've kind of cut across the grain and said, you know what, I'm going to go to St Mirren. Because there's a lot, no doubt your pals, etc., all supporting Rangers or Celtic or whatever it might be. So for you to go and say, you know, I'm going to support St Mirren, that is great. That's quite a noble thing, frankly.
Well, I grew up...
You were either one or other.
Well, we were all, I mean, not just St Mirren, right back through the generations. And something that really happened to me when I was a kid, I went everywhere to see St Mirren. We went to away games with my uncle who drove us. My dad didn't drive. My uncle would drive us, and his two sons would go in the car. So we'd sit in the back, my dad and my uncle in the front. We went everywhere, except when we played Rangers and Celtic. I wasn't allowed to go to Rangers and Celtic games because my dad said that he didn't like what they were about. And that always stuck with me. And I, as I grew up, I found out what he meant by what they're about, the bigotry and the sectarianism. And I always just think, Dad, you know, when I was a wee boy, you know, Jimmy Johnson was playing and Jim Baxter was playing, and there was some great, the Lisbon Lions, the whole thing. And I never got to see that team. And in a way, I want to go and see this. But I always remember when I was old enough and I said to my dad, I want to go, I'm not playing Rangers. the first season, the Premier League under Alex Ferguson. And I said, I want to go myself. My dad said, right, okay, you go, be careful. And the Rangers fans, the behaviour was ridiculous. There was bottles flying and policemen getting battered. And I remember thinking, wow, my dad was kind of right. And I've always had this, all the way through my career, for good or for bad, I've always had a kind of crusade against everything that the bad element of Rangers and Celtic stand for. My take has always been, Rangers and Celtic are such great clubs with some like 200 and odd trophies between them, European trophies and all the great players. Yeah. And yet everything that their image is about negatives, about sectarianism and bigotry and Irish history and all this stuff. And I've kind of fought against that. In fact, my first book I brought out in 1999, the subtitle of the book was How to Survive in Football Without Sucking Up to the Old Firm. Right? and it played, of course, no Rangers and Celtic fans bought the book, which kind of cuts back on your sales. But so many people still talk about that book as a kind of a rite of passage type book for anybody who doesn't support Rangers and Celtic.
Yeah.
Listen, it's caused me a huge amount of problems over the years in terms of the abuse you get from people, where you can go, where you can't go. You know, bars you can get into, bars you can't. Because what happens is, for anybody that doesn't know, Rangers and Celtic in Scotland, neither of them will ever accept that you don't support them. They always think you support the other one. Mm-hmm. So you're either with us or you're against us. So if I criticise Rangers, they don't remember that I've also criticised Celtic. They just go, you're always giving it to us because you're one of them. Mm-hmm. And Celtic. So I get the same thing from both sides, which can be wearing, and maybe we'll come on to talk about this. It had a serious effect at one point, and I allowed it to become quite a serious part of my mental health. But anyway, I wouldn't change that, because I think it's important that somebody has a. When I was growing up, Ian Archer was a famous journalist in Scotland, and Ian Archer was very much the same. He was a Partick Thistle fan, and he was very much, I'm not having this old firm nonsense. It's not. You hear the TV commentators, the fans are in fine voice today, and they're actually singing about, terrorism and murder, and and it's not fine voice, it's horrible. So that's been a thing for me since the start. And as I say, life would be a lot easier if I hadn't decided to sort of have a kick at them. But
no, I'm glad you said that, Bill, because the theme of these podcasts is about empowerment, and you generally, I'll leave it to the guest to say, right, this is what has been my reason for being empowered, etc. But I think at the risk of being contradicted here, I think with you it's been cutting across the wind, as it were, in terms of discrimination, racial abuse, sectarianism, any form of discrimination. It's like you'll go the other way. You'll sail your own ship. You've always sailed your own ship.
I'm a
for the righteous cause.
Probably, a little bit of an outsider on things, and sometimes I really resent in the media the way that you're kind of standing on your own. Sometimes not on your own. There's one or two other people that do it, but generally it's a lot easier for people in the media just to go with the flow and not to hear things. So I think in my life, David, there's been two periods of empowerment. One is deciding that this is the kind of journalist I want to be.
As in sports, or just the
just whatever I'm writing, because over the years from sport it's developed into writing a column at the front end of the paper on all that stuff. So, but whatever I want to do, I've decided go for it 100%. Be your own guy, and if it gets you into bother with some people that are harder thinking, then that's fine. That's the first period. The second period of empowerment for me was after, as I mentioned there, I had some 10, 11 years ago. I gave into some really serious mental health problems, and a lot of it was brought on. We're going to
come on to that as well, but sorry,
But when we do come on to that, the second part of the empowerment for me is regaining control of my own head.
All right, okay.
So that's something we can talk about, but that's a really important second part. But the first part is, I think, to say, this is who I want to be. This is the style I want to write in. Trust yourself. You know, it's like being a footballer. When you're a footballer and the manager says to you, "Go on, son, want the ball. You know, be brave on the ball. Don't be the guy that just gets and gives it to the next guy." So that's me. I want the game. I'm saying, I want to write about that. I want a say on this, right? And I know it's going to stir people up, and some people, there's a kind of line here, because it's very easy to be the guy, and we all know people in the media who say and write things like this for attention and for headlines. I think the real empowerment, and the only thing, I've been doing this for 40 years now, so the thing that allows you to stay in the game for this long is by being honest with yourself and not writing things just to get people's backs up. So you got to write things that you believe in, and B, that you can face. If I write something about you today and I meet you in the street tomorrow, I want to be able to look you in the eye and say, all right, you're going to fall out with me, but I meant what I wrote.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe we can sort it out later on. But if you're not honest with yourself for a start, then there is no power.
Yeah,
you know,
you get an honest belief in what you're saying, whether that be...
Yeah.
You deal with sports, and we'll come on to that again in a bit more detail, but you've also kind of branched into, I've seen talking about politics and current prime ministers, previous, etc. So there's no stone left unturned here.
No, I mean, I'm one of these people. If somebody say about things, you know, and I love reading and I love listening to other people and I love learning off people. I'll do this thing where if I'm watching I don't know. I was cooking last night. I was making risotto, right?
Okay.
And while I'm making a salmon risotto, and so Sonia shouted me through and says, "Oh, look, Rick Stein's on the TV." And Rick Stein was in Venice.
Yeah.
Rick Stein was in Venice, and she says he's making risotto. So while I was cooking risotto, he was making risotto, but he was making it in a Venetian way, and the Venetian way has a slightly different recipe, and that it uses a collection of spices to give it a wee zhuzh up. So I was running back through the spice rack and got all the spices in it, and cranked it up, and put it in the mortar and pestle and put it in, and it tasted magnificent. I'm thinking, well, there's something else you've learned today. So that's my things all the time. So when they asked me years ago, it was actually when Richard Littlejohn used to write for The Sun, and he was in the Scottish edition and the English edition, and then he was poached off to work elsewhere. And they were saying, who do we get to do this cut? And the London edition brought in somebody who just didn't sit well with Scottish readers. So after a couple of weeks, the editor was going, and I said, I'll give it a go. And that was...
You came down to London for a while, didn't you, to write for...
I did. That was a long time. That was in the late 90s.
Right.
I worked in London for a while, but this is when I was back up the road. This is about 2004, 5. And I said, well, I'll put my hand up. So I'll have a go. And if it doesn't work, you get somebody else in. And sort of 15 years later, it's still going. So I would have to say, if somebody ever said to me, what's your kind of what's your mindset in life about these things? What do you what keeps you going? And I said, I'm desperate. I would tell you that I'm desperate never to get found out.
I remember you always say this.
Yeah, don't get found out. So you keep going for as long as you can, doing what you can, and then one day somebody's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Listen, mate, we've just realised that for the last 40 years you've been completely busking this. So off you pop." So until that happens, I'll just keep cracking along
on your merry way.
But if you can trust yourself and be honest with yourself, that's where the empowerment for me comes from. That you say,
good point.
So these are my opinions. You can't take them away from me, and it's it seems to be working. So
I know you're known for the footballing side of it, particularly in Scotland, but you went to the Rio Olympics, didn't you? How did that go? I'm going to, I can speak about that. How did that go about in the first place?
It was very weird. I tell you what happened in 2016. So
was that your first Olympics that you've been asked to go and? Yes. So
in May of 2016, 27th of May 2016, I got married to Sonia. We went away on honeymoon to California. When we came back from California, we got to Heathrow. Sonia went up the road, and I jumped on a plane to go to the Euros. So
that's right. Yeah.
She went home. I didn't go home. So I went to the Euros. while I was at the Euros, I got a phone call from the head of sport of the Sun in London.
Right.
And Stephen Howard, who was the chief sports writer in London, was leaving and was planning to leave later on in the year. One or two things happened. He was leaving now. So they didn't have a chief sports writer to go and write this sort of big kind of coloury, sort of set, the big hits at the Olympics. And they said, would you like to go? And I went, wow, yeah. so
Kid in the toy store.
did the Euros, popped down to Wimbledon, did a bit of Wimbledon, came home for a couple of days and flew off for, I think, 5 weeks in Rio, working with the Sun team.
And this is you just married at that point? So I've been mighty pleased with that.
So I had 5 weeks in Rio. I came home from Rio. I had 3 days. I went to Malta with Scotland. I came back from Malta. I had a week, and then I went to the Ryder Cup in Minnesota. So between getting married on the 27th of May, I think between then and the middle of November, I had about 8 days with my wife, which is the secret of a very happy marriage.
Don't see them. Never going to hear them.
But the Olympics in Rio was...
that's what I was going to come on to. That must have been...
unforgettable. I mean, for so many reasons. For the cultural side, I mean, I thought that the greatest cultural shift I could have had was doing the World Cup in Japan and Korea in 2002, which for me was massively eye-opening, everything about it. But Rio was just incredible. And the great thing was the paper said to me every day, phone us, tell us what you're going to do today, and we'll leave you a space and go and write about it. So you had the freedom of Rio to go and do whatever you wanted to do. So I completely fell in love with the gymnastics, because we had a couple of the young guys, the boy Max Whitlock, really came to the fore. And I went one day, I said, I'll pop into the gymnastics on my way to going somewhere else at the Olympic Village.
It was all contained in one thing, or was it spread out all over Rio?
There was a kind of Olympic Village where you went down, and there was the tennis was there, the gymnastics, the swimming, all the kind of big arena events. And then miles from there was like the aquatic events, and then miles over there was the equestrian, then there was the golf. And Rio's massive. I mean, it was in the morning to get from our hotel was kind of Flamengo area, and you were a good hour and a half. It was like a Glasgow to Dundee or a London to Birmingham commute to get to.
It strikes me as a bit kind of organised chaos, Rio. Is it a bit like that?
It was. I mean, they set up this kind of rail system that worked really well, but it was a long trek every day. But also you then went to things like, the very first thing I did was the archery, which was set up on the, when you watch the carnival, and there's a bit where there's a kind of stadium bit where they all come down. They're all come down the middle. Well, that's where the archery was. So you're in the middle of. But the carnival, where that happens, is in the middle of pretty much in a pretty heavy favela. Mm-hmm. So you were told, don't go outside this bit and only walk here, and make sure you've got a driver with you, and don't ever let your driver go away without you. It was a bit, and of course we then went back there. Quite near there was the stadium where the track and field was. Yeah. And you went there, and when you came out of there, I mean, you're coming out of there maybe 1-2 in the morning because of TV sort of times for back home. So you're coming out of there kind of 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, trying to find a taxi. So the whole thing was just this incredible adrenaline thing. It was, I mean, so if you'd said, 8-year-old boy meeting his headmaster, gets an introduction to journalism, and that's where it takes you. I think about wee Sam McDougall, my headmaster, and go, thank you.
But I mean, it could have stopped. It could have stopped there. And that's it. Fine. I've done my bit. But I'll take a step back to you'd said about the Euros. You'd gone to the Euros before you'd gone to Rio. Is that the first Euros you'd gone to, or had you gone to the ones?
Oh no, I've done now. So first ones, World Cup 1990. The first World Cup that I wrote at, and then Euro 96, World Cup 98. So World Cup 9 was it World Cup 1998, Euros 2000, World Cup 2002, Euros 2004, World Cup 2006, Euros 2008. So I didn't go. The only World Cup I didn't go to was in Brazil. It's the only one I've not. So since 1998, the only World Cup I've not been to was Brazil.
Yeah.
And I think I've been to all the Euros apart from the one that was in Poland and Ukraine.
Right.
I've been all of the Euros.
I was thinking, with the 2016 Euros, the kind of feeling I got from it, there was a kind of, it's set in France, there was an underlying feeling that something bad could happen at any moment here. Do you remember there was the terrorism? And there was the Russians kicking off, wanting to fight with everybody and anybody.
There was a lot of that, yeah. I'll tell you a night, I'll tell you a night that this really came out to me was, I was in Marseille, which, if anyone's ever been in Marseille, it's a beautiful place, but very hairy. And that's where the Russians and the English had kicked off in the first weekend.
Yeah, that's true.
So Portugal are playing Poland in last 16. So I get to Marseille. I've got a car, I hire a car, but I can't get anywhere near the stadium because roads are mental. So I managed to get off, take my car back to my digs, and I take the underground down as far as I can, and then I start making my way into the stadium. Go to the game. Yeah. Game goes to extra time and penalties. Come out, it's late. There's been a bit of a scrap in the streets with some Poles and some French and some Russians. So they shut the underground. There's no taxis.
All right.
And I'm trying to go home. So I end up walking home through Marseille, not having a clue where I'm going.
Yeah.
And I genuinely that kind of follow your nose kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I end up in a graveyard.
Not the best place to be that time of night.
And I came out the other side of the graveyard and realised that I'd walked onto a closed off bit of motorway where they were rebuilding it, and it was sort of shut. And I'm going, I don't know what to do. So anyway, back through the graveyard, back out, and I can see where I'm meant to be going. Yeah. And I'm about 800 yards from the hotel, and there's a van starts creeping up behind me. And I thought, this is it. This is the end of the line for me. And this van starts and it's flashing its lights at me. And I start running. And I've got all my bag, my laptop, and I'm running. And I get to my hotel, and this van comes up behind me. And the guy comes alongside me, rolls the window down and says, in French, "Are you okay, pal?"
Or what's to that effect?
And I looked down and he went, he says, "Oh," I says, "It's Scottish." And he went, "Oh," he says, "I saw you come out of the graveyard and I wanted to make sure you were all right." I says, "All right," and it gave me a heart attack, man. So to be honest, I sometimes remember, I've been to so many matches abroad that the kind of sometimes, there's some that will always stick with you, but sometimes it's the bits round about it.
I can imagine. Not the match itself, but...
I mean, there are matches that will just never leave you. I was thinking about, I don't know if you saw recently Porto against Sporting Lisbon when it all went a bit Begbie in the last couple of minutes. Pepe was involved. Pepe, formerly of Real Madrid in Portugal, now with Porto. Anyway, 5 guys got sent off in stoppage time.
5?
With this, there was a 40-man brawl. The subs were on it, and Pepe's in the middle of it, throwing punches and that. And I thought back to the World Cup in Germany in 2006 when Holland played Portugal in Nuremberg, and it was the most carded game in history. And it was I think it was 1 sent off and 20, I'm guessing 21 booked, 20 booked. And it was just one of those games that I was phoning the office saying, like, how much space have I got here? And they're saying, you've got 900 words. So, like, 900 words is going to take in the bookings. I can't tell you anything else about the game tonight because it was... So games like that, you remember every little instant, but other times it's it's being chased through a graveyard,
It's kind of moving forward a wee bit to the Euros, the 2020 Euros here. 2019, whatever it was, the one final at Wembley. Again, though, for me, it was, the whole thing was marred. And I don't know, Bill, whether it's been because everybody's been locked in for a couple of years, and again, we'll come on to this, or what, but it just, there seemed to be an undercurrent throughout it of violence, of pent-up anger and frustration, and it's just all blown up in the final.
Yeah, the final was such a shame. I mean,
I didn't go down to win the thing right from the start, but it was a team let down by the country, by the nation.
Being married to an Italian, we were on Italy from the start. And sitting here watching the final was fabulous. But the real shame of it is, and actually the lid was kept on it to a certain extent, because that could have gone in the final. It could have been really properly horrendous.
Oh, really kicked off. I mean,
it was one of these ones that's that close to being a full scale riot. And
I know.
And I think there's a massive. I think police are finding an upsurge in not the kind of trouble you saw when we were kids, where there was actually running battles across terraces and stuff.
Yeah.
But individual people being horribly antisocial, and I think a lot of it now appears to be down to drug abuse.
Do you think?
I think they're finding huge amounts of cocaine residue in football stadiums.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think we have a problem there, where what fuels young guys now used to be a few pints, and what happened was a few pints, they'd go to the game, and when the game started, everybody would start to come down a bit because the alcohol starts to wear off. But the opposite is kind of happening if they're still able, because you saw it in the build up to the final, and people were openly taking cocaine outside Wembley. You saw it, and it was. Yeah, it's a real problem, because I don't know how they stop this happening. There's an empowerment. If you have the power to go and buy a drug that's meant to be completely illegal and have it in your pocket and go to the football and get off your face on it and cause all sorts of trouble, how do we turn that round? I don't know.
I don't know.
Like in Scotland, when in 1980, when the Rangers Celtic Scottish Cup final turned into a full-scale riot, it was an alcohol problem. Everybody's drunk, bottles and cans are being thrown. Yeah. So the authorities decided we're going to ban alcohol from football grounds, and to this day, alcohol is still banned from football grounds because of that. Mm-hmm. That climax to years of crowd trouble caused by drink. But how do you do that when it's a tiny little wrap of drugs in somebody's jeans pocket, rather than somebody carrying a bottle of wine with them? Which people used to drink a bottle of wine and throw it down the terraces. Mm-hmm. So it's a massive, and I felt so sorry for England, for the team, for the manager, because I think Gareth Southgate is such an open and intelligent man. Yeah, his players respond to his way of management. Mm-hmm. They did supremely well to get to the final. I don't think they played the kind of football sometimes that is going to change the world. Mm-hmm. But they got to the final, and they probably should have won the final. I think the reaction in the end to the players who missed the penalties was just shameful.
That's what I was going to come on to.
Shameful.
The racial abuse.
Oh my goodness.
Again, this seems to be. We thought, just a personal view here, I thought we'd locked that away in football here in the UK, in England in particular. But now, again, I don't know whether it's COVID or whatever it's done. We've been locked in. It seems to be on the rise again. Racial abuse.
I think a lot of it is, again, we use the word empowerment, the power that people are given on social media. And you think, I can say that. I can say this. Like, for instance, if I wrote in a newspaper, right? If I wrote in a newspaper the things that go online, I'd last about a minute and a half in my job. You'd be out the door, the paper would be sued, you'd be, it would be boofed, gone, your career's finished. And yet online, some of the stuff that I get sent personally is horrendous. Is horrible. The stuff that I know is written about me on fan websites, especially the Rangers and Celtic ones, over the years has been terrible. And then you see these young lads, and all they've done is miss a penalty kick, and it's taken out of them because of their colour. And I just think, I thought we were in a society that was starting to move on. Yeah. But I think what you see again with the Tottenham thing recently, where Tottenham have tried to get rid of what they now call the Y word. They don't even want to say the word, but it's the Y word. That's right. Yeah. And the first thing some fans do is say, we'll react to that. By chanting, we'll sing what we want. We're Y and we know we are, and all that kind of stuff. So there's a kind of there's a counterintuitive thing goes on now, where the more people go down on their knee, the more people you'll wear anti-racism T-shirts, the more you'll get the, I don't want to even say brainless, because there's probably a lot of really intelligent people who think this, but the people who say, I'm not having it. I am not having you telling me about racism, or I'm not having you telling me about sectarianism. Or, I mean, there's a lot of intelligent people get wrapped up in the sectarianism thing in Scotland. They're not all dafties, you know, and that's what really, that's what worries me more, is the amount of intelligent people who lose their mind with it.
Aye, you're right. I don't know whether it's a release, a stress release or whatever, but I think now with the pressures that particularly younger athletes are facing, whether it be football, tennis or whatever it might be, the damage to them mentally is going to be far greater than anything physical. You know, there's a real mental health issue here that we're facing. We need to address. I know the FA are touching on it, but I don't think they're going anywhere near far enough to address it properly.
No, I also think that and the real difficulty is, David, that the mental health issue is not with the victims of racism or sectarianism. The mental health issue is with the people who are sending out the messages. You know, and that's the problem. So if somebody's anonymously, if somebody's changing their email address every day to send out horrible stuff, and they're sitting in their boxer shorts in a bed sit at 2 o'clock, as Gordon Strachan used to say, with a double dog and a can of Kestrel lager, right? That's what he used to talk about. That was his picture of the people that abused him online. Yeah. And if that's what they're doing, they're the ones with the mental health issue. Yeah. It's not Saka or Rashford or anybody else. It's not, they're not the people with the problem. The people with the problem are the people that are causing the damage to them. And how do you get those kind of anonymous keyboard warrior people, and how do you give them the therapy they need to understand themselves better? Because there's a lack of understanding of society, of culture, of so many things. That's what the problem is.
You're right. It's, at the moment we're only we're trying to address the effects of it, not the cause of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we say, right, so Bukayo Saka has had terrible online abuse. So the Spurs, the next time Arsenal plays Spurs fans clap on at the park. They go, "Isn't that a nice thing to do?" He'll feel better now. Yeah. But it won't change the fact that the guys, women, whoever, who have abused them are still there doing exactly the same things on a very, very minor scale compared to all that stuff. Up here about a couple of months ago, Dunfermline Athletic Championship team down near the bottom of the league, having a bad time. The chairman, lovely guy called Ross MacArthur, a really intelligent football man, was getting terrible abuse. And because of the abuse, he decided to resign as chairman. Yeah. And there was some Dunfermline fans on Facebook, friends of mine, are saying, "Oh, that's a real shame that Ross is gone." And I went back and said, "Wait a minute, why are you allowing him to go, but still allowing these guys to say, surely they're the ones who should be banished from the club, and he's the guy who should be protected?" I think he is now staying on for a while to see how. But I'm thinking, why do these people never get challenged? We don't challenge them. And at Celtic and Rangers again, we go back to them. We don't challenge the amount of sectarianism that's allowed to be sung. The broadcasters don't challenge it. Broadcasters will say, "We apologise if you heard a bit of bad language," if the sound effects might picks up somebody swearing in the dugout. Yeah. But 10,000 fans are singing some horrible sectarian song. Yeah. Nothing's said. So it's how we challenge the mass of problematic people who are, people who are causing the problems. You're right, cause and effect. We're dealing with the effect, not the cause.
Yeah, that is no. I don't think it's no easy task to do that, because it's not at all. You're having to get whole groups of people together to sort this out and take it right back to the beginning. I know you've tried to address it, and again, you can tell me this: is it break the arrow?
Yeah, so about 10, 11 years ago, I had plainly been suffering with mental health, with anxiety and a bit of depression for quite a long time, and wasn't admitting it to myself. And eventually, doesn't really matter circumstances. But I got to a stage where I went, you know what, I can't deal with this anymore the way I'm going along. This is just... So I went to the doctor, I got medication, fine. I then started to use physical exercise as a way to bolster my mental health. Worked on it, wrote a book about it, got that out, got other people interested in doing the same thing. Then I started to work on it a bit more and think, no, there's more to it than just exercise, join the trip. There's more to it than this. I wanted to come off medication. I didn't want to be on medication forever. Mm-hmm. So I started to work on unpacking what was in my head. Almost like, if you imagine, everybody's got a big cupboard. Everybody's got a cupboard in the house that when you open it, stuff falls out. It's full of rubbish.
Yeah.
And one day you have to face it, and you take everything out a bit at a time, and you throw away the stuff you don't need, and then you keep the stuff that you might use later on. And that's what I had to do in my head. From there, I went and studied a form of mental health therapy, neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah.
Qualified in that, then got an advanced qualification in that, set up my own little practice, which is just getting off the ground just now, where I try to offer very practical problem solving of mental health issues. I don't like to talk about therapy or counselling. It's not lie on the couch and tell me about your mother. It's where are you? Where do you want to be? How are we going to get you there?
Yeah.
And it seems to work for people, and it's something that I really want to explore further.
Yeah, I think COVID for me has exacerbated this issue for people. It's not, and I've said this to you before, it's not the actual virus itself. No. I'm not trying to understate that in any way, but it's the mental health issues coming out of this. That's going to be huge and long lasting here.
When I started up Break the Arrow, COVID was kind of young, and my initial clients were all single issue. I can't sleep. My relationship, my wife's breaking down. I've got no confidence at work, whatever it is.
And you could repeat that through every other household throughout the land, no doubt.
But in the second half of COVID, by the time we came through into the tail end of 2021, people were coming with just a big envelope of issues. My head is screwed. My head is messed up. I don't know what to do. I can't, everything was wrong. Rather than somebody coming and saying, can you help me? I've got insomnia. Can you get me out of this pattern of not sleeping? Yes, of course I can. Like,
COVID was the perfect storm for it all, wasn't it?
Everything, brain fog everywhere. And everything has become exaggerated in people's heads because you're isolated. Isolation is not a fun thing.
No.
If somebody said to you, like, you're a very, very busy man. If somebody said to you 2 years ago, David, listen, don't come to work for the next 2 or 3 days. Just sit in the house, put your feet up. You go, oh, magnificent! I can't wait. I'm going to watch Sky. I'm going to put the football on. Them 2 or 3 days, then I'll feel great again. But when somebody says to you, you must stay in the house for 10 days. Do not leave the house for 10 days on pain of breaking the law. Then it becomes a thing, and that has really started to get it. And I notice as well because my other little thread in my life is that I teach indoor cycling. I'm a spin instructor, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And the number of people who dropped off, even when the gyms reopened, number of people who used to come all the time who wouldn't come because they were worried about being close to people again. And it takes a lot. It's taken a long time now for their confidence to come. I see people now coming back who haven't been in for 3 months, 4 months, who are now coming back saying, I think it's okay now. And it's all in here. It's all in your head. It's all, not a lot of it is based on logic, but logic has gone out the window during, and I think we see even in the way our politicians act, they're not acting in a rational manner, and on a lot of decisions.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, I know we're touching on politics here. It's the decisions that they're making now are basically self-saving, as it were. You're right, the logic is going out the window with them. They know that they can't ask, this is a personal thing again, they know they can't ask the population of the UK to sacrifice anymore because they don't have the moral authority to do it, as far as I'm concerned.
And also we have a situation where you have a government in Edinburgh and a government in London. And the government in Edinburgh watches for what the government in London does and generally does the opposite. right? So, for instance, it looks as if Boris Johnson will announce soon enough that COVID restrictions will be, instead of being the end of March being lifted, it'll probably be the end of February. So that's fine.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert in case anybody hasn't seen this later on, right? Immediately out of Holyrood in Edinburgh, they say, but we won't be rushed into doing the same thing. So nobody asked you about it.
I know you've fallen foul of Nicola Sturgeon before, haven't
times,
you? Your comments have not been well received.
I think too many decisions have been made. I'm not saying the decisions have always been wrong, but I think a lot of the decision making, both in London and in Edinburgh, has been made for the wrong reasons. And I don't think when you look back
in relation to COVID or just in general.
In relation to COVID, I think.
But don't you think this is a precedent here, Bill? I'm not saying you're right or wrong, but everything we've been doing is a first. In hindsight, is a great thing.
And I would have said in the first, I look in COVID as having two halves, right? A pandemic of two halves, right? So in the first half, from February 2020 into the first lockdown, probably through till early 2021, completely new to everybody. And at that time, I wrote a book on that first 200 days or so, and you couldn't, although you can be critical, you can't blame any politicians, any leaders for not understanding what they were getting into, because it was something unique. They had never faced anything like it and would never face anything like it again. By the time we came into the second half of it, though, from early 2021 to now, I don't think there was any excuse for not having learned from the first time round. And I look at them and I still don't think they're learning. Still thinking they're making the same mistakes. They're still making decisions for the wrong reasons. I think logic. The point I'm trying to make is that if our logic in the house has gone, if we're brain fogged, I think they're brain fogged as well. I think it's taken a real toll on. They are not immune to the brain fog toll. Just because they're in charge of the country.
Yeah, we're nowhere near, I think, normal times. Pre 2019, whatever it might be.
I also don't know, David, what normal times are, because what is not? I don't know what normal is. I'm very lucky never to have led what people might call a normal life. I get to travel I get to work from home during the week, and then I get to travel for my job at the weekends. I don't get weekends off, so that's people. My normal is my weekend is maybe a Wednesday and a Thursday. So normal for me, normal for you, totally different things. So it's. I think we started to in the first year of COVID. We talked about I can't wait to get back to normal. I'd actually prefer that we reset into something new that became what do you call it? I don't even want to call it new normals. I think normal's normal and fine are two of the worst words in the English language. I'd love us to reset into a more workable, happier place. I'd love us to people to be able to enjoy their work more. And enjoy their social life more. I think we got in before COVID. I think we're getting to a place where we were running so fast all the time, just to stand still. And I think we need. If I was hoping that what would come out of this, we'd all take a little breath and we'd reset. And I think if it had ended after the first 8-9 months, I think we might have. But the fact that they went on into a second year.
Yeah, I think, Bill, and we're getting on the issue of sport here, but I think we're going to end up, because of the cost of living crisis, fuel, etc., and cost. I think we're going to have a real poverty gap here in the UK. I don't know about the rest of Europe, but here in the UK, and we're heading for a real crisis. How that's going to affect people, God only knows. But I think we're in. The rest of this year and next, we're in for a real stormy ride. I think that's just my view on it, just because of the cost of living is just shooting through the roof. I
hope nobody tunes into this podcast for a laugh.
I know. we started in sport, and now we're talking about politics and the price of a tin of beans.
So let's go to Brexit. No, let's not. So no. But I love the fact that I am so lucky that every week I get to sit down and let all the stuff we've talked about. I get to let it out onto paper, and they say, "Well, there's your page. It's blank. Write what you know, right within the parameters of legality."
Yeah.
And off you pop. And that makes me, every day I know how lucky I am to have that job, to have the freedom just to do what suits you, you know?
Yeah. For viewers here, I've known Bill for many, many years. And it's not, I'm not trying to, paddle your boat here, Bill, but you're getting better as you get older in terms of your viewing life and your looks. Obviously, your good lady's having a good impression on you. But I think
that's what happens when you marry a hairdresser. David, I really appreciate it. And listen, I think it's absolutely right, because when I think back now to, for instance, I think now when I'm doing the mental health thing, and I think, do you know what? I think a lot of the stuff I wrote 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago was so out of kilter with what I'm trying to do now. Because you think when you're a bit younger and you've got the freedom to write, so you think that the freedom to write what you like means you can write anything you like.
Yeah.
And it doesn't.
A bit bulletproof.
It doesn't. And you do think it, and you go, so I called this footballer that, or I gave him a nickname and it stuck, and you think they're smart, but you're not. So what you learn to be is more constructive. Hopefully, you can still be brutal. You can still be, you can still really make your point, but you don't have to be.
You don't have to assassinate somebody.
You don't have to be a smart ass about it. Do you know what I mean? You don't have. You can do it in a way that people say, "Okay, I'll take that. That's fair." But I know that there's stuff I've written in the past that if people look back and now say, "Well, you're now trying to sort out people's mental health, and you wrote that about that guy," so there's a dichotomy there for me that I've got to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's part of the process of unpacking my head and getting it back into order again.
Yeah. We've all had dark moments, Bill. If we're honest with ourselves, Bill, everybody has had.
Well, listen, people who, some people watching this will know they won't, but I remember watching you as a young guy coming into the St Mirren team as a young guy, and you were a loose cannon. You sent off in your second game, and sort of just, you were all over the place. And I watched this guy then develop into a really steady, cultured, organised centre back. And then as you go on, you move into coaching, and then to see you then move into where you are now into the legal world has been so. You're right. So people grow, and you've got to be allowed to grow. And sometimes I see young footballers, for instance, being hammered for things they do when they're 19 or 20, and somebody just handed them a big, huge wedge of money. And you think, he'll be a different guy when he's 30. And he's got to be allowed to become a different guy, because we all did stupid things.
I think that's the problem we're facing these days. So, Bill, you're not allowed to do that. In our day, you're allowed to make mistakes out of the public glare, out of anyone's view. Here, you can't do anything, and it's within seconds, it's all over the media, and you're getting crucified for nothing.
But do you know one of the problems, David? And I'll come to a very current issue on this. People in your day as a young player with St Mirren, right? You weren't part of it, I know, but there was a drinking culture at the club.
Oh, right? I remember it. I do remember.
There was a drinking culture.
Certainly.
But guys would go to a place quietly. Yeah. Do what they're doing, go back to someone's house, have a party, do what they're doing, and it was a social thing among them. I'm watching young people, not just in football, but people doing stupendously bad things, and then filming them and putting them online for the rest of the world to see, and then they wonder why they're getting in trouble. And we can talk about the Kurt Zouma thing just now.
I was about, you took the words out of my mouth.
Now,
for me,
if Kurt Zouma decides, right, it's like the old forest and a tree thing.
Mm-hmm.
Kurt Zuma kicks his cat across the kitchen and nobody films it. Does the cat make a sound?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but his brother films it, and you would think that within 10 minutes, you would go, by the way, I know we thought that was funny, but let's just delete that. But next thing, it's online, and why would you do that to yourself? I can understand. I would never kick a cat across the kitchen, but I can understand that in the moment when you're playing about, people do stupid things that are completely, that one of these, or you had to be there kind of things, right? Yeah. But they obviously thought that was funny for whatever reason at the time. But why you would film it and put it online and get yourself into that kind of trouble that blows my mind.
Yeah, that was the issue for me. Actually, it's the one kicking a cat. It's just that's a no straight away.
It's horrible.
The issue here is his brothers filmed it, and then as I thought, for a laugh, we'll put it online, filming it, and then putting it out to the whole world to see and think, great, we'll have a laugh at that. I just can't get my head around that aspect.
No, and when we talk about empowerment, social media has given the whole world a new power to communicate. And
for good and bad.
But like the good is that if we're doing this right now, we don't need to have a TV contract.
No.
And we're on Channel 4 doing a chat show. We could just do this on our phones in our respective houses or offices or whatever. And that's the good, right? If I have an idea for a song, I write a song, I put it. I don't need a record label. I put it online, and people listen to it. So great. But then the downside of it is the amount of trouble that people cause. Never mind causing trouble for other people by like we're talking about the abuse that people give out, but the trouble that people cause for themselves by choosing to create these digital tattoos of their stupidest moments. And again, it's a bit like we're talking about drug problems and racism and stuff. I don't know what we do about people who are that. What's the word I'm going to use? Don't want to say stupid.
Believe it.
Not really. Yeah. but what do we do about people who choose not? It's not the fact that they choose to do something criminal.
Yeah.
Or offensive, but it's the fact that they choose to show everybody it. I can't understand that.
I think there's an innate sense of right and wrong that I would like to think you get that from your parents.
Yes.
And in the absence of that, these days you get so many broken families all over the place. There's no guiding light. I mean, again, I'm getting off the thing I've spoken here, but there's no guiding light.
Well, listen, I would always go on the basis that I wouldn't want to do anything that would have embarrassed my mother. Yeah, which is not a bad yardstick to live by.
No. Exactly. Well, I think we'll call it a day at that because we could sit and natter all night here.
Really enjoyed it.
It's been a pleasure, an absolute pleasure, and thanks very much for taking the time out of your day. I know you're a busy man, for taking the time out of your day to come and speak to us on this podcast. Cheers.
Listen, thanks so much, and I hope to see you soon.
Thanks for joining us on Empowerment What's the Score. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to never miss an episode.